welcome once again, listeners, to YUH with Lisa, Phil, and Aaron, who will hopefully be joining us shortly. This week, we're talking to Rebecca Bratspies. Her book, Naming Gotham, The Villains, Rogues, and Heroes Behind New York's Name Places. She is a professor of environmental law at, is it CUNY?
CUNY, yeah.
CUNY University. It's a university that encourages law students to go into some kind of justice, environmental justice.
Well, that's Rebecca's. Yeah, that's
okay. I'm sorry. You go ahead. Let's yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you. It's nice to meet you virtually. I teach at CUNY, which is an acronym for the City University of New York. And we are a public interest law school, which means that all of our students want to go into public interest or public service work. So they are the DAs and the public defenders. They work for city agencies. They work for state agencies. All kinds of different things.
Okay. I'm gonna do something very, very bizarre right here. I'm gonna change my. I'm gonna pause.
Is he in the Banshee? Yeah. I can see that.
Well, she buys these shirts for me. I don't even know what they say. I put them on. I go out and I went into the convenience store and somebody read that behind the counter and the whole store is laughing at me. It's like I looked down. It said
one of my
I don't
favorites.
know if you remember what it said, but it was like, that's not cool.
Yeah, well, he likes his meat rubbed and
Mm-hmm.
And it's double entendre. I do buy him a lot of funny shirts. And then some, of course, concert type shirts. Like he has Susie and he has Blondie. He has AC/DC. He has the big AC/DC concert shirt with the AC/DC font. But then he also has a shirt that says, in that font, that says ADHD. And underneath it says, highway to, oh, look, a squirrel.
So I saw AC/DC perform when I was in high school, and
nice.
I would wear the ADHD shirt too.
Yeah. I saw him too. My first concert, AC/DC, was awesome. But I'm interested in this environmental justice idea. I don't necessarily know what that means. Just to hear that. I know what it's. I think I know a little bit about social justice now. That But why don't you tell us a little bit about environmental justice and how your law career is shaped by it?
Sure, I'm glad to. So environmental justice starts from the basic principle that everybody should have the right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and live on land that isn't going to make them sick. And that should be true no matter who they are, regardless of what their skin color is, what their accent is, how much education they have, how much family wealth they have. Everybody should have these basic rights. And then when we look around at our society, we see that so much of the polluting infrastructure has been steered into communities of color, particularly Black communities, but communities of color in general, and low-income communities. But if you look at if you do a control for economic status, you see that at every point along the spectrum, Black people are more likely to live in communities that are heavily polluted. And so it's that injustice that environmental justice is trying to rectify, trying to say, hey, that's, everybody should be breathing clean air. And so in order to address that, we want to start in the places that are most polluted.
Yeah.
If we clean them up, we get, go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, just here in Cincinnati, we have an area, like a neighborhood. It's right there behind Hopple Street. What's that called?
Over the Rhine?
No, behind Hopple. Between Hopple and the college.
Yeah.
Okay, but beside the point what it's named. it is an area that had a lot of the pollution. And I feel like there's two factors going on here. Yes, the pollution is more affecting poorer people, but part of it is that they can afford the rent
Right.
in those polluted areas.
So
I know, like, yeah.
One of the big debates about 20 years ago in studying environmental justice was, are we steering polluted activities into communities, or are people moving to those communities because it's more affordable? And all of the evidence shows, in fact, that we are steering polluting infrastructure into poor communities and communities of color, rather than it being people are moving to those areas because they become more affordable because they're polluted.
Right.
So, it's a chicken and egg problem.
Right. Well, I know, like, in that area, companies knew that, like, Bob was polluting. So John moved next door, So
it becomes a path dependency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of these.
It's like the city pushed these companies.
Exactly. Let's make this area a sacrifice zone so everybody else can have cleaner air.
Right.
But if we start from the belief that everybody should have clean air, right? That doesn't work, because we're sacrificing the community to protect everybody else. Exactly.
We need to address the pollution, not move the pollution.
Exactly.
I know, what is it? I heard, and this may not be a real thing, but I heard about, like, a Long Island, I'm sorry, I have to say Long Island, because that's how my sister-in-law pronounces it. But I heard about a Long Island cancer cluster where and her family was actually, I believe they were part of it. She's from Lake Ronkonkoma. And that's where she grew up, and her mother had breast cancer. At least one of her mother's sisters had breast cancer. One of her sisters had breast cancer. So, this is like, they're part of that Long Island cluster. And my understanding is at one point Long Island was used as a dump, and then they started building houses on it. Like, they niced it up.
Yeah. So one of the issues you run into, of course, is that people who are family members share, very similar genetics, and cancer tends to run in families. There are genetic presusceptibilities to cancer, so that gets layered onto, evidence of neighborhoods, and a lot of this work is done on census tract data, and the number of cancers you would expect in any particular census tract versus the number that actually exists there. And I mean, Long Island, or Long Island, as you say, has some well-documented cancer clusters. But it's not unique to Long Island. That is true in many, many places. And of course, if you look at asthma, you see a much clearer pattern, because of course, asthma is more directly connected to pollution exposure over a shorter time period. So it's easier to connect those dots and make that case with asthma than it is with cancer.
Yeah. And then, I mean, here we have, we're actually, our nickname is Allergy Valley, because Cincinnati is we're surrounded by 7 hills, and we're in kind of a valley. And what happens is weather patterns and pollution have a tendency to, they'll periodically stick overhead and not move.
Yep.
And if we get a blizzard, that blizzard might be here for 8 days instead of 2 going past, because it'll kind of stick. The last time that happened with us, it was 1977?
Oh, the blizzard of 78 was
78. Yeah.
Right.
So that was cool, because we had 10 days off school.
I wonder if some of these these areas of town that are plagued by these issues you're talking about, that extends to services and stuff too, Police service sometimes is not as responsive in these areas, and maybe
Mhm.
garbage collection is not as thorough in these areas. Maybe the grocery store that's there doesn't have the same cuts of meat and stuff that maybe they have in a more affluent area. It all
Oh,
seems
yeah.
to kind of come
Yeah,
together.
it all comes together. I mean, where are there fewer parks? Where are the schools underfunded? Where are there less likely to be hospitals?
Grocery
All,
stores, vegetate,
Mhm.
vegetables,
Yeah.
food scarcity. I know this is kind of a not really funny story, but kind of funny. My boss had inherited a house
Mhm.
in a specific neighborhood here in Cincinnati. And the police or the pizza guy would not deliver to her house. Okay. But he would deliver to the house next door. So she made friends with the lady next door. And whenever they would order pizza or anything else, she would just sit on her porch.
Hmm.
And she would let her know she was ordering in case she wanted to order too.
Right.
But, but she would sit on the neighbor's porch to get her pizza because they would not deliver to the house next door.
Because it was in a different zip code
I don't
or
know. I
neighborhood
don't
or
think so. I think
Huh.
it was just this was the demarcation line.
Mm.
You know, this they put a line.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why. I don't know if she made friends with the pizza guys and eventually got them to just bring it to her house since it was right there.
But I mean, the what you're trying to say is that there's some sort of second standard for this,
Yeah, there was
whatever
a
this,
standard
Yeah.
for
like
this.
it was in a
Yeah.
different area of town. Maybe that
Well,
somebody, an executive or somebody somewhere said, we're not delivering to this area of town.
Yeah.
this is an economically,
Yeah.
down part of
Which I
town,
think
of
that
course.
that goes on in boardrooms. They talk, they strategize, grocery stores, hospitals, they strategize these things behind closed doors that really are kind of they're shady. They do leave people
Yeah,
disenfranchised,
yeah.
Yeah.
and
And
vulnerable.
if we look, the areas that are most impacted now in places like New York City and places like Cincinnati and other areas across the country were redlined in the 1930s. And what that means is the government sort of created maps of cities specifying which areas were good for investment and which areas were bad for investment. And the areas that were bad for investment they were called hazardous in quotes, and they were colored in red. And the government said, we will not insure mortgages in those red neighborhoods, and we will not invest in those red neighborhoods. And the characteristics that made a neighborhood get that red hazardous designation was typically too many Black people or too many Jews. And that's what it says on the forms.
Wow. That's
So we're
Now
living with
it's
the legacy
more-
of that today.
that's kind of startling that just to hear you say that.
I feel
I can
like
show you, I can send
Yeah.
you a
Oh,
link
yeah.
if you want to look at the maps.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's and if you look at that, that's kind of ridiculous. I don't think that's what most people are using as a factor now, as far as like, I don't know, but I hope not.
Well, you
No,
talked about
but
the
we're living
park.
with the legacy of that because
Right,
those
right.
neighborhoods, right, that were designated as red were deprived of capital. So you had families who lived there who owned houses who all of a sudden couldn't sell their house because people need a mortgage to buy a house, which meant that the value of their houses went down, which created this cycle of economic disenfranchisement and poverty that we're still navigating.
Right.
Right.
Well, here's Aaron, our
Hi,
co-host
Aaron.
Aaron.
Hey, Aaron.
Hi,
We're currently talking about neighborhoods and parts of cities that were redlined by the government as being places where they do not feel it would be profitable to invest. And one of the things that Rebecca pointed out is that it was predominantly in neighborhoods with lots of Black people and lots of Jews.
So this is Rebecca Bratspies.
Rebecca, Aaron, Rebecca.
Light conversation,
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, we were getting pretty deep into this.
So, I think, is that, what else is there that we've, okay.
Well-
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you would like to really point out about that subject?
I would like to tell your listeners that one of the things that I do in my spare time is I work with very closely with an artist to make environmental justice graphic novels. And they are available online for free download for any nonprofit or educational use. So I encourage people to check them out. He's a phenomenally talented artist, so they're beautiful.
And where can those be found?
They can be found on my website, which is just my name, RebeccaBratspies.com. And there are two series. One is called the Environmental Justice Chronicles, and that's longer books. And then there's a shorter series that we're making right now in conjunction with the United Nations called the Earth Defenders. And that tells the story of environmental defenders around the world who are risking their lives to protect forests or rivers or other natural settings.
Cool. And
That's
at the end,
great.
we always ask for your information again. So we'll give that once again.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, you teach college students, you're a professor, but do you find that the Environmental Justice Chronicles is, getting younger kids involved in it? Or do you have communication with younger audiences who are becoming aware at an earlier age of environmental justice?
Yeah, so before COVID, I ran a program in New York City public schools. We haven't actually picked it up again, but I hope we will, where we would run 6 to 8 week workshops with high school students, sometimes middle school students, around environmental justice. And they would read the books. We would do sort of a like Common Core analysis of close text reading and then connect it to either their history class or their science class or sometimes an art class, whatever. And then they would identify what they considered an environmental justice in their neighborhood. And we would try to create a plan to change things. So young people would become, environmental leaders in their community, trying to change whatever they had identified as their environmental justice priority.
Mm-hmm.
It's really loads of fun. The kids loved it. And, they got to do things like testify before city council, meet with state representatives, all kinds of stuff that made that schoolroom civics into something that they really understood. Because when I would walk in the room, they could all tell me, oh, there are 3 branches of government. We know that. And then I would be like, great, what do they do? And they're like, we don't actually understand that. So by the time we were done, they did, though.
Our friend Jeff, who's been a guest on here, is also a teacher at a Cincinnati public school. And his students got together to, they had a crosswalk put in? Is that what it was?
The large bumps in the road.
Oh, speed bumps at the crosswalk. That's what it was.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah.
Yeah. I was complaining about it was going to tear out the underneath of my car, and he said, well, you can thank me for that, Phil.
You just need to go slowly and it's not a problem.
Right. Exactly. I get the points, but
Understand why he's so, about the speed bumps tearing out the car, because he is not a speed demon. No,
Phil's the slowest driver, one of the slowest drivers I've met.
Okay, to be fair, Aaron is a pizza delivery guy at the place that was 30 minutes or less.
Long time ago.
Well, yeah, but you still
30 years ago. No, I don't.
But yeah, no, Philip is a very, very safe driver.
I drive faster out here in Los Angeles because you have to.
Aaron, he got a speed ticket once.
I did. I was in a school zone, but that was like my worst crime I've ever committed. I went to court over that and paid my fine. But I got a little bit of that Hollywood anxiety the other day when I was driving back from Mount Healthy, coming down a huge hill back down to the area of town we live right now.
Yeah, you didn't do well in canyons, huh?
No, I didn't. No. Anyway,
little too much, nothing on either side.
Yeah. It's a mental thing.
Yeah.
But
and also I was almost named Rebecca. My parents put 3 names in a hat. Rebecca Lynn, Lisa Beth, and Bertha Leonida. I'm just glad I dodged the bullet.
Well, we got the 2 best of those 3 on the podcast, the 2,
Yeah.
Lisa and Rebecca.
Yep.
Yeah.
No offense to Bertha Leonida.
Leonida.
It was great aunt Bertha and great aunt
There you go.
Leonida.
I'm
Sounds
named
great.
after my great grandmother.
My grandmother wanted the name. She didn't even meet these people. No, she did know Bertha. She did not know Leonida. But she just picked their names off tombstones at the family graveyard. So
Well,
How
congratulations
romantic.
on being Lisa.
thank you.
Yeah. But so we've
I would
covered
have liked Rebecca too. Mm-mm.
we've covered a little bit about Rebecca's background at CUNY,
Mhm.
also the Environmental Chronicles, the Environmental Justice Chronicles.
Mhm.
But she's kind of here to talk about her latest book, which seems like it must have been somewhat of a fun project for her to do, and based on her own interests.
Mhm.
And that is Naming Gotham, the villains, rogues, and heroes behind New York's place names. I enjoyed reading this.
Thank you.
I don't know much about New York, but it seems like there are more things named after people in New York than your ordinary city. Like we have a few here. We have the
actually
Brent
have
Spence
plenty of
Bridge.
but-
We
Yeah,
have
everything's named after people everywhere when you break it down, Phil.
Well, we have
Well,
a
maybe
lot
it's
of,
just New York is bigger
Davis
than I guess.
downtown
Yeah.
is it's a grid and it's what is it on one way is numbers
Mhm.
and then the other way is like Elm Street, Race Street, so it's hard to say. I think most of them are just like trees.
New York's like
Mhm.
avenues and boulevards, right? Or they generally go same
So
direction.
the streets go north-south and the avenues go east-west in Manhattan.
Streets and things. That's it.
And
But
are they like named, or are they by like numbers going this way, numbers going that way?
so the streets and the avenues have numbers. So you could be on the corner of 4th Street and 4th Avenue.
Oh,
Now, when you get into Queens, it gets really where I live, it gets really complicated because there's like I live right near 31st Street, 31st Avenue, 31st Road, and 31st Drive. It
Nice.
can get very confusing.
I can
Yeah.
see myself completely lost. Thank
Yeah,
God
you
for
never get your
GPS.
Amazon deliveries.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Apple Maps or Google Maps. Makes it
Yeah.
much easier. Yeah, the roads that are named are the highways, really. The highways and the bridges. I mean, there are some of the avenues
Tunnels.
also have names in addition to numbers, depending on where they are. But I always feel so bad for tourists because tourists, if they're driving, would be using a map that would have a number. And I have no idea what the numbers are for any of the highways because they have names. There's there's the Major Deegan Expressway, there's the Jackie Robinson Expressway, there's the Grand Central Parkway, all of which on the map have a number, but no one has a clue what the numbers are.
Yeah. Well, we
In
have
LA, we know all the numbers.
Yes.
we have this cross county highway,
Mhm.
which just goes from one end of the county to the other. in
They
Hamilton
renamed
County.
that, didn't they?
They renamed it Ronald Reagan. It's but the number is 126.
Mhm.
So I still call it cross county because it was cross county forever.
Yeah.
And I mean, I refer to things there. Let me ask you if
Mhm.
you have a lot of this in New York, because one of the things that we have that's confusing is we actually are in Cincinnati, but we live in this place called Norwood.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, they're in an enclave.
right. And it's the largest city in the United States that is completely surrounded by another city.
I don't think it's the largest, but it's one of many.
Mhm.
Okay. But my research, it's fine.
Yeah.
But
it-
yes, it is okay. But
So we're
it's
kind
not
of like a
Miami.
donut hole.
But-
is
What
yeah,
happens
I always
is,
say it's Cincinnati's version of the Vatican.
but what happens is you've got this street that separates Cincinnati and Norwood. And on this side, this street is named, what is that? Seymour? Or not Seymour?
You got a few different ones right by you. Section in
But
Rhode
yeah, the
Island.
street literally changed names
Mhm.
when you cross. I just think that's awful for anybody who doesn't know the area.
Yeah.
You know, so like, let's say this side of the street it's Sam, and on the other side it's Tom. There's
Right.
like no, yeah. And I
Well-
think that's ridiculous. I think they need to fix that.
Well,
But-
New York City became New York City in 1898 when Queens and Brooklyn voted to join with Manhattan and the Bronx to form the city of Greater New York. So, the city boundaries were set then, and it included 5 boroughs: Staten Island, Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn. And in fact, Queens, what we were talking about earlier in terms of Long Island, was part of Queens County. But the main town in out on Long Island, a place called Hempstead, voted no to the joining together. So they separated off from Queens County and became Suffolk County.
Oh, okay.
And then, so there are a whole bunch of towns there now, but at the time it was really just Hempstead.
So who's Suffolk?
They're all named after, all the counties in New
Politicians of
York
the
are,
day.
well, no, actually, all the counties in New York are mostly named after the British aristocracy. So it's Queens County and King County and Westchester County and Richmond County and Ulster County, right? They're all names that come from the colonial period.
Got it.
So you're in Queens, right? Is that what
I'm in Queens, the best borough.
the best borough? Okay.
Yeah,
Best of
I've
the
been
fun.
listening to a podcast for 19 years that's been mostly based out of Queens, Keith and the Girl.
I don't
watched
know
King
it.
of Queens.
Check it out.
King of Queens. I like
Yep.
that.
But yeah,
Um,
I know a lot of New York. I've never been to New York, but I
Oh.
know a lot of it from pop culture and from Keith and the Girl.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd
Mhm.
like to go myself. I'd like to visit.
Yeah, you should
It's like,
come.
yeah, there's the Long Island Expressway. I'm thinking when you're talking about Long Island and all these other, and the Long
Yeah.
Island Railroad.
The
Yeah.
Long Island Railroad. So the Long Island Expressway was designed by Robert Moses. Most of our highways that I write about in the book were designed by Robert Moses, who was never an elected official in New York, but he was the power broker, as the book written about him is called. And he was, as parks commissioner, he decided where the playgrounds were, where the parks were, and where the pools were. And as arterial commissioner, he designed most of the major roadways, and they're all about moving people through neighborhoods, many of them the environmental justice neighborhoods we were talking about, to get people from the suburbs into Manhattan.
What
Yeah.
year approximately was he setting all this up? Was this for horses or for cars?
It was for cars.
Got it.
It was for cars. It was in the 1930s to late 1950s, early 1960s. So
Okay.
he built the Major Deegan Expressway, the Sheridan Expressway, the Bruckner Expressway, the Long Island Expressway, the Ann Hutchinson Parkway. These are just things that are in the book that I'm thinking about. But the Jackie Robinson Parkway, which was called the Interborough at the time, the Van Wyck Expressway. And he refused to add light rail. People begged him, especially when he was designing the Van Wyck Expressway, which he said was going to make travel to the airport a pleasure. And if there's one thing people know about trying to get to the airports in New York
I know
City,
from
it's
Seinfeld,
not
yeah,
a
you
pleasure.
can't take the Van Wyck Expressway to get to the airport.
Not unless, I mean, it's more a parking lot than anything else.
Yeah.
But when he was designing it, people begged him to get the right of way for light rail, and he just said no. He didn't want people who couldn't drive getting places. He's also notorious for
Exactly.
building the
Or the redlining right there.
he's notorious for building the bridges on the roads, many of the roads that go to, in particular, to the beautiful parks upstate or to the beaches. With the bridges were too low to accommodate buses because he didn't want people who took buses to go there. He wanted them to be for the wealthier people, and in particular for the whiter people.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's kind of insidious, isn't it?
Nature designed
But-
Yeah, and
racism.
But you
those
see
those bridges still are there, and they're still too
Mhm.
low for buses to go through.
Moses.
Yeah. Well,
So is anything named after him?
There is a park named after him. Not a lot is named after him. He's very much fallen out of favor for some of the reasons I'm
Yeah.
talking about. There is a state park named after him,
Okay.
and it
Well,
has a very nice beach.
that's an interesting point. Why do we institutionalize these people? We're not talking about, they're not all,
Why don't we Me Too them?
they're not all great people. Some,
Mhm.
there's a mixed bag. They're not all necessarily successful politicians, or they're not necessarily, there are all kinds of stories behind these
You're,
things.
you're,
that we're-
you're an hour away from the capital city named after a colonizer, right, Phil? Columbus.
What?
Columbus? No,
Yeah.
that's like almost 2 hours. But
Well.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
right.
mean,
That's
some
good.
things are being renamed, but I think you have to pick your battles on that.
Right.
Right.
And like we were talking about the Van Wyck Expressway. So Van Wyck was the first Robert Van Wyck was the first mayor of Greater New York that we were talking about earlier in 1898. And he was unbelievably corrupt. He went in not a poor man, but not a rich one. And he left with millions of dollars in 1910. So he had millions back then. It was we're worth hundreds of millions now. And it was all graft. And in fact, in his obituary, which is usually when people try to say something nice about somebody, the New York Times described him as the most corrupt mayor in New York's history, who oversaw, I'm trying to get the language right, who oversaw an administration mired in ooze and muck.
Wow.
Now, he's had
Nice.
a lot of competition since then in terms of corruption. So I don't necessarily think he would still have that banner. But, he's definitely not one of the heroes in the book.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
When I read about him, it was in
Mhm.
real contrast to someone like William Cullen Bryant.
Yeah.
He was like a man of letters, a poet, editor of the New York Evening Post, abolitionist, basically seemed to try to do the right things in his career, political career. But people gravitate to the more salacious sometimes. So you think about Rikers Island, and
That needs to be renamed.
Yeah. Yes. And
Immediately.
that's part of the plan.
That's an emergency. What are
yeah.
what are the options?
So we're not there yet, but City Council voted in 2019 to close the jail on Rikers Island. Right. For those of you who don't know, Rikers Island is New York City's main jail and has been since the 1930s. And it is renowned as a place of brutality. Rolling Stone ranked it as one of the 10 worst jails in the country. And so City Council in 2019, in responding to a blue ribbon report written and under the guidance of the former chief judge of the state, a man named Jonathan Lippman, decided that it was irredeemable, it was a stain on the city, and it had to be shut. And so by law, by 2027, the jail on Rikers Island must be shut. And then City Council in 2021 also passed a series of laws known as Renewable Rikers, which commits the island, once the jail is shut, to being used for renewable energy generation and storage and wastewater treatment, in order to take those polluting facilities out of the environmental justice communities we were talking about, which are also the communities that were most impacted by the unconstitutional stop and frisk policy that the New York Police Department used. So it's sort of a kind of a restorative justice kind of thing. And as part of that, the island will be renamed. And the reason that Phil and Lisa were saying the island must be renamed is that it's named after a man named Richard Riker, who was the city's DA and then recorder, which is a municipal judge. And in the capacity as municipal judge, it was his job to enforce the fugitive slave laws, something that he did pretty happily. In fact, he joined with the police commissioner of the time and a couple other high-ranking officials to create what came to be known as the Kidnapping Club, which was a scheme to not only send people who had liberated themselves back into enslavement in the South, but also to grab random free Black New Yorkers off the street, say that they were fugitive slaves, deny them the right of habeas corpus, and send them into slavery. And so of the people who are the villains in my book, which is the villains, rogues, and heroes behind New York place names, he's sort of the most villainous.
Yeah.
And that's why the island needs to be renamed.
I would have to agree with that
Yeah.
assessment. That's a pretty bad rap sheet.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw RBG into the mix.
RBG.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
What
Oh.
about her?
the notorious RBG,
Yeah.
Right.
So nothing
her
is named
name.
after her yet.
the Rikers.
Oh.
Oh, you would like to rename Riker?
Ruth
I am
Bader
not in charge
Ginsburg
of that.
Island?
That will be done. I don't know how that will be done. I would imagine that there will be a significant community consultation.
Okay.
We'll see where we wind up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I-
Don't crowdsource it, or it'll be like a Bodie McBoatface situation.
It will not. Yeah, it will not be done in that kind of a process.
Mm-mm.
I prefer the heroes. I like the heroes of the book. Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
Billie Jean
Kosciuszko
King.
is my favorite hero.
Who's that?
Tadeusz Kosciuszko. He
I
was.
couldn't pronounce the name. You better have to read.
Nobody can.
Kosciuszko.
There's a bridge named after him here in New York. There are things named after him all over the United States, and of
Like a
course in
Romanian
Poland, where he's
name?
from.
No,
No, he's Polish. And he came to the United States. Well, he came to the colonies to fight for independence and to fight. And he was a professional, a military engineer, so he brought a lot of expertise to and help professionalize a lot of the Continental Army. He also was during the Revolutionary War was an avid anti-slavery advocate. In fact, his aide-de-camp was a black man, a free black man from Massachusetts named Agrippa Hull. And together they created a strategy that, first of all, resulted in the victory at the Battle of Saratoga, which was a turning point in the war, and then created part of the Southern strategy that was relatively effective. After the war, he went back to Poland and led Kosciuszko's rebellion, which threw out the Russian sort of invaders, for lack of a better word, but the Russian puppet government, and ended serfdom and gave religious freedom to the people of Poland. Didn't last that long, but he was really really one of the heroes. Plus, my kid says I have a crush on him, which I sort of do. He was very handsome.
Mm. Now I'm gonna have to look him up. Maybe I'll put him on my special friends list.
Well, presumably,
It says I'm not allowed to have dead people on it, but since I'm never meeting any of the people on the list at all,
there are no photos of him. Right? There are.
Ryan
They're
Reynolds
paintings
and
of him.
Michelle.
Jonathan West painted a very famous painting of him while he was recovering from his war wounds in Philadelphia. And it's reproduced in the book in black and white, but if you look online, you can see it in color. And he was a very handsome man.
Well, the championship, the civil rights at that time, that's pretty special because there's really no incentive, no real incentive other than just humanitarianism.
Or just a sense of what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
In fact, in his will, he left all of his property in the United States because that's how the Congress paid him. He left it all in trust to buy the freedom of black men and to train them so that they could make their living in trades. Unfortunately, he put Thomas Jefferson as the executor of the will, so it never happened.
Yeah, I know that Jefferson has some,
Jefferson is problematic
he has some
as a
issues, yeah.
as a hero.
But,
Is he an anti-hero or a anti-villain? Jefferson.
He's
Or
a
a rogue.
complicated character.
Yeah, complicated, definitely.
yeah.
But I'm guessing he's not in the book.
He is not in the book. There's nothing in
nothing named for him.
in New York City named after him.
No, I think I saw, or I did hear a podcast or two preparing for this. I think I heard you mention that there were several chapters that you had to omit. And I was just wondering, are there any plans for, second volume, or are there any that you particularly regret not being able to include? Anything, that you could share with us?
Yeah. So one chapter I couldn't include in the book because nothing is named after her yet is a chapter on a woman called Jane Matilda Boleyn. She was the first Black woman to serve as a judge in the United States. And in fact, for the first 25 years she was a judge, she was the only Black woman to serve as a judge in the United States. She was appointed by Mayor LaGuardia to the Domestic Relations Court in New York. And she served there on her whole career. She reorganized the entire court. She was offered a federal judgeship at one point, but she said that she thought she was really doing important work where she was, so she didn't want to leave. When Constance Baker Motley was appointed to the federal bench, she was the first Black woman to be appointed to the federal bench. She turned to Jane Boleyn for advice, and so did Judith Kay, who was the first woman to serve as the chief judge in New York. She was really an unbelievably impressive woman. She also had a commuter marriage. She was married to a lawyer. She kept her own name, and the press didn't know what to do with that. They always called her Miss Boleyn because she didn't take her husband's name. He was a lawyer. He worked in D.C. for the Treasury Department, and so they had a commuter marriage. Again, very much ahead of her time, very inspiring character, but nothing is named after her yet. I'm part of a coalition trying to get the Queens Midtown Tunnel renamed in her honor. That's the one, if you think about Men in Black, where they drive upside down on the top of a tunnel.
Yeah.
That's the Queens Midtown Tunnel.
Oh, okay.
So she's not in the book. I wrote a blog. One thing I've been doing about the people who I couldn't fit into the book is I've been writing blog posts about them because I love this stuff.
Yeah. You found something that's really inspired you, so you can, I can, so I understand, how did you, we'll talk a little bit more about the book, but what inspired you? How did it get started? What got you on the track to writing this exactly?
Traffic jams.
Traffic jams?
Traffic jams. I don't like driving. I live in New York City. I almost never have to drive. But my parents live in Pennsylvania, and they live in a part of Pennsylvania that you can't get to easily on public transit. So if I want to go see them, I have to drive. And that means taking, in particular, the Major Deegan Expressway. And the Major Deegan Expressway is the road that goes past Yankee Stadium. It connects Queens to the George Washington Bridge, among other things. And, some rap stars have written songs about speeding on the Major Deegan, but that's only because stuck in traffic on the Major Deegan doesn't rhyme. It is a terrible road. And I used to take it because I had to, and I would curse because I'm not well behaved in traffic. And I would curse
not a
him.
real clean rhyme either.
Well, no, but it's close, If you can rap, it works, but I can't. And so I'd always be like, I hate that Major Deegan. Who was he?
Man.
And I realized no one had a clue who the guy. Everybody took the Major Deegan, but no one had a clue who the guy was. So my family was like, well, why don't you find out? You're always complaining about this. Find out who the guy was. And I did, and it turned out that he wasn't very impressive. So, it was sort of interesting that this guy who was basically a mid-level bureaucrat, but very well liked, had this road named after him. And it made me think about okay, the Major Deegan connects to the Bruckner. Who was Bruckner? No idea. So I found out who he was. And then, the Van Wyck, who was he? And some people, like Jackie Robinson, everyone knows who he is.
Right.
But like there's a bridge called the Goethals Bridge, and it connects Staten Island to New Jersey. And General George Washington Goethals was, among other things, the man who finished the Panama Canal. Or there's a bridge not too far from the Goethals, there's a bridge called the Outer Bridge. And almost everybody in New York assumes that it is called the Outer Bridge because it is the outermost bridge. But actually, it's named after a guy named Eugenius Outerbridge, which is why its official name is the Outer Bridge Crossing. Because, you couldn't call it the Outer Bridge Bridge.
Yeah, I wish they did.
Oh yeah, that's funny that's just funny how maybe he should have been given the prominence of the more major road, and if they really thought it through. But maybe at some point they just won a contest. Draw your picture of the bear, and you'll get your name.
Well, a lot of it had
Major
to do
Deegan
with
was well liked, and now people curse his name on a daily basis.
exactly.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it had to do with: did you die young? Were you Robert Moses adjacent? And was there something almost done at the time?
Yeah. Do you like that movie,
Almost done.
Gangs of New York?
That's
an amazing movie. I love that movie so much. Anyway, none of those guys in that movie deserve to have anything named after them, though. They're some bad dudes.
Pretty much not,
indeed.
yeah.
So you remember the movie The Warriors?
Yeah.
I love that movie. Philip has not seen
I've not seen it.
the one.
Really?
You mean the one set in New
Dude,
York?
there's a
Yeah.
baseball themed
Warriors
gang
come
in
out
it.
to
The
play.
Baseball Furies.
So it starts in Van Cortlandt Park, which is a big park up on the sort of Bronx, Manhattan border, named after the Van Cortlandt family, which was a very powerful family. And it was only when I was doing this book, the Van Cortlandts aren't in the book either because I ran out of space. But as I was doing this book, I realized, this is that's where they have that big meeting of all the gangs that starts the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the Warriors have to get back to Coney Island, which is about as far south as you can get from Van Cortlandt
So it's
Park.
kind of like a gauntlet that they have to go through.
Yeah.
I love that
They're
movie.
falsely accused of having killed Cyrus.
Exactly.
Right. Mhm.
Is it from 1987 by chance?
No, it's from
No,
like
it's-
1980, 79, 80.
It's
Oh,
an old movie.
Yeah, it's
I can't use it with my students anymore because they don't know what it is.
It was
They're like, yeah, we
it was
weren't
a
born
staple
then.
of the early days of
Didn't
cable
they
TV.
do a
It was on the
remake
movie
of-
channel every third day.
did they do a sequel or a remake or something?
No.
Not as far as I know, but that
Maybe
doesn't
they've
mean
been
they didn't.
talking about. I know I heard something about it and I was like, oh, that sounds so cool.
No, it
Something
wouldn't work
with
today.
big
There's cell
graphics,
phones.
But I don't know.
You
Yeah,
They
you
would-
wouldn't
they
have
would
the,
just
you wouldn't have
Uber
the
back.
lips lady on the radio. It would be a totally different thing.
Yeah.
true.
Unless
true.
it's a
No, but
period
I
piece,
think
and then
that
why
I think
remake
it
it?
was going to be more of an homage to the original
Mm.
period, that time period. But there is a movie called The Warriors made in, I guess, New Zealand
I don't
about
think it's any
actual
relation.
About
which
Maori?
was that?
There's a Thin
Yes,
Lizzy.
it's. I think it
Yeah,
was
is
about
it a
Maori.
Maori movie?
It might be Australian, but it was about the Maori. Yeah. And I think it was made by that family. The family is actually the family.
The
So like they
family?
made their own story as a feature film, and it did very
interesting.
well. But the 79 Warriors, I did really enjoy that. Yeah.
Well, Thin Lizzy had a song called The Warriors.
Yeah. Okay.
The Warrior. And then Scandal. Warrior. All right.
Okay.
So I'm glad that we were able to get this together because it was touch and go for a while because of our circumstances. So I thought it was really worth the wait.
I like that we touched on so many different things in the book that makes it pop.
Yeah.
So I feel like people are going to want to look for this book.
We do something at the end of this podcast that is totally voluntary. So if you don't want to do it, that's fine. It's just a little game. We call it the Elite Eight mini brackets. And what it is, if you think of college basketball, gets down to the Elite Eight weekend. You got 8 different topics, I'm gonna throw them at you.
What's the
this
topic?
versus that one.
Mhm.
You choose one. We'll go around the room, and it usually takes 5 minutes. You up?
And
Okay.
the topics are
Or
about
what's the theme this week?
environmental movies,
Okay.
feature film.
Yeah, not
Not
documentaries, but
Uh-huh.
Hollywood type movies with environmental themes.
And if you feel like, feel free to say, really, you think that's environmental?
Are there any Miyazaki movies in there? I guess that Studio Ghibli's not Hollywood movies.
Unfortunately, we didn't dive that deep into the subject.
Those are wonderful movies, though.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah.
And they all
Aaron
line up right in that.
Yeah. All right, so I will
Environmental.
abstain from a vote. I'll let you all vote so that we get a winner in each bracket. So in
There's
the
4 of us, but okay. Oh, no, 3. Never mind.
so in
I cannot count.
the first round of the
Mhm.
Elite 8 environmental movies mini bracket is the movie Chinatown versus Aaron Brockovich. So Rebecca, have you seen those movies?
I have. Oh, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Because they both kind of feature water, pollution. So
Yeah. Well, I met
that's
I
what
met
would-
Jackie Chan
One's
once, so
pollution,
I think I
one's
have to.
just
Yeah.
theft.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm,
So Chinatown isn't so much environmental. but-
Chinatown
Yeah, I think
is environmental.
It is.
It
I mean,
is.
Oh, okay.
it's not poisoning the water.
I'm
It's
going to confess that I haven't
stealing the
actually seen
water.
Yeah.
Chinatown. So,
Doing what to the water, Aaron?
stealing.
the water,
Stealing. Yeah, okay. Well,
diverting
too
the
late to
water.
change.
Yeah.
No, it's still environmental because California depends
Yeah, it's
on
still
that water.
environmental. But that's very
Absolutely.
environmental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a different kind of environmental than
Yeah.
poison water.
Yeah.
Oh, also, I'm going to say, Rebecca, Aaron's a hike enthusiast as well.
Yep.
So if you ever end up in Thousand Oaks, California,
Join the Scorpion Hills gang.
hit
Okay.
him up for a hike.
I may do that. My sister-in-law
just-
lives in Torrance, so we're
cool.
in the
Yeah, no,
relative area, not
One of
area.
our weekly hikers lives down in that general area. I think he's in Torrance proper.
Yeah.
There's
Somewhere
some
in
nice
South
hikes
Bay.
up the mountain there.
Do you like
Yeah.
MASH?
The TV show,
MASH.
I loved it as a kid. I haven't seen it in a very long time.
One of Aaron's regular hikes goes to the MASH set,
Oh, that's cool.
and they
Yeah, it's
still
pretty
have
cool.
stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That's neat.
So
Right.
if you don't think Chinatown's an environmental movie, that's a perfectly
do.
good
I do.
reason to
We
vote
do.
for
We do.
Aaron Brockovich. So
Okay.
I'm
So-
voting for Chinatown myself.
all right.
Okay.
Aaron's got Chinatown. Rebecca, what do you got?
I think I'm voting for Chinatown as well.
Okay, so Chinatown moves on.
I'm going to throw a vote to Aaron Brockovich because they're tits, Bob.
Yeah, right. It's
I
funny.
love that.
That's a funny
That was a
line.
funny line.
It's called tits, Bob.
What do you say? Oh, that doesn't work for me. What am I doing wrong?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So okay, the next one, China Syndrome versus The Day the Earth Stood Still.
China Syndrome.
Okay.
You got a China
Yeah.
theme here. I lived in China for a while, so I got a
Oh,
China
wow.
theme here.
Yeah.
Yeah, China Syndrome.
Okay.
Okay.
Lise?
The original, The Day the Earth Stood Still. I'm going to give that to my, because of my dad. Because that was like his favorite movie for a long time. He loved
I don't think
that
I've
movie.
seen The Day the Earth Stood Still, so it had to be.
I
China
saw the
Syndrome
original
for me.
black and white, but only
Yeah.
because I learned about it from the Rocky Horror theme song.
Mhm.
Well, China Syndrome sort of precursor, like it was just weeks after that
3 Mile Island.
3 Mile
3 Mile
Island.
Out. Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
very similar. Very
Yeah,
similar.
the Day the Earth Stood Still was the first CD my dad ever bought.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and he made me watch it.
CD
Yep.
or DVD, you mean?
Yeah, DVD. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah, they're all discs.
third matchup of the first round is Soylent Green versus Logan's Run.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Oh, I love both of those.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Soylent Green, I think.
Okay.
I'm way too far past 30 to be comfortable with Logan's Run.
Yeah.
I'm 57, so
We're all 55 and up over here.
Yeah.
I love the end of Logan's Run though, where is it Peter Ustinov?
It's been so many
But-
years.
Trying to
I'm
remember.
Yeah.
It's
I've
really
watched them
aggy.
both within the last few
Been
years.
forever.
That's
Yeah.
a tough one for me.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you're taking it seriously.
I'm gonna go Logan's Run.
Okay.
Okay, I am gonna go Soylent Green
It's
because you know
hat tip to
Soylent
Farrah.
Green is people.
Exactly.
Mhm.
All right. So the last matchup of the first round is Day After Tomorrow versus 2012.
Not Dark Waters?
Is
We thought about that one. We thought
the
about
Day
that
After
one.
Tomorrow, is that the one that was
That's the
the
nuclear.
miniseries from when we were in high school?
Yeah.
No,
Oh.
no, you're thinking of the
The Day After.
yeah, the day after.
What's the
The
Day After
after
Tomorrow?
tomorrow is the one where everything freezes.
Yeah.
haven't
Everything's
seen
flash
it.
freezing.
Like Ice Nine,
Okay.
like Cat's Cradle, Vonnegut. No?
I don't know. Like the whole world is freezing. Like the whole of
Sounds
North
like
America
Cat's
is
Cradle.
putting. Oh, okay. I haven't seen
Yeah.
Cat's Cradle.
I don't think they made a
I don't
movie of
think
it.
anybody made it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then is it a book?
Yeah, it's a Vonnegut novel.
Okay,
Yeah, so-
maybe it's gonna. I haven't actually read that, but maybe the movie is
Yeah,
loosely based on that.
There's a
But-
chemical called Ice Nine that anytime it comes
Mm-hmm.
into contact with any water, all the water that's attached to that instantly becomes like permanently frozen.
This is not that.
Yeah.
This is more. There's like the Ice Age is coming,
Wow.
to North America. That's where it's set, of
All right.
course.
Please, I'll let you open up.
What's
with
the
your
other
first-
movie?
2012. That's John Cusack. It's the Mayan thing. So
Oh.
it presupposes that the
I don't
Earth
think I
is
know that
blowing
one.
up on a Mayan date
Right.
in 2012.
Oh, I do vaguely
Yeah.
remember
So
that.
the Day After
Okay.
Tomorrow is a climate catastrophe movie, right? The North Atlantic
Mhm.
circulation is disrupted. And
Right.
so
Thank you.
that is scary as hell because
Yes.
we're starting to see that the possibility of that kind of a disruption. I mean, it
Right.
wouldn't necessarily be what happened in the movie, even if that did happen, but I think I have to vote that. Though the day before the world was supposed to end, I went to Tikal in Guatemala, which is this huge Mayan ruin. We didn't go
wow.
on the day the world was supposed to end because I had my mother-in-law and my then toddler with me, and it just seemed like it would be way too much. But it was really fascinating to be there right around then.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just that much,
A bit of travel
Speculation.
we would not have considered.
All right. So
Yeah.
Rebecca said The Day After Tomorrow. What about you, Lise?
I'm gonna go The Day After Tomorrow too. I think it's
Yeah.
a better movie, and I think it's a more realistic possibility.
Okay.
I
Go
know
with the
one
sweep.
of
I'm gonna go
uh-huh.
with it too.
okay one of the things that scares me is the Last of Us.
Mm.
That series, because even if it's not real, and I've looked it up enough to see that like, you know, the fungus
Isn't that based on a
some
video
scary
game?
crap, huh?
Yeah, it's a
Isn't that
video.
based on a video game?
Yeah, but the science behind the fungus situation is scary AF.
Hmm.
You know.
Have to
What's
look
the
into
fungus
Yeah.
situation?
Well, basically, the Earth has cooled off enough. Is it cooled off or heated up? Do you know?
I think it's likely to heat up. I mean, cool off.
Something
More
is
likely that
happening.
it
There
will
was
heat up.
I just remember there was a pandemic, and
Right.
it came. I was just like, yeah, I can't handle this. I got enough
No,
pandemic
yeah,
in my
no,
life.
I didn't watch past like when they
Yeah.
went to, I guess it was like Colorado, and they met with the chick that used to be on 3.5 Men,
You're
as like
already-
a bad guy general. Huh?
You're already way beyond what I know of it.
Yeah. Well, but what happens is something happens to the temperature of the earth and the mushrooms start like invading human physiology. And they get into the humans and they destroy the brain, and then you just become this thing, and the mushrooms want to propagate, so they try to find anything that they can propagate on, which includes people, animals, etc.
Man, Bob Barker would be
It is
totally
it is
pissed
a
off at me for losing control of this game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going for the one
but
that's not that because that
it's-
sounds more
that's a
sci-fi than
realistic
environmental.
possibility.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't vote for
Mhm.
it. But, or I mean,
Okay.
or
We're
that's
down
not
to our
on
final
here, but-
four.
Uh-huh.
Chinatown versus China Syndrome.
Uh-huh.
Rebecca,
Got the China
Yeah.
versus China.
China Dilemma.
China syndrome.
Okay.
Chinatown.
Ooh,
Okay.
will it
Mm,
be?
I'm a tiebreaker. Okay, what's the environmental problem in China syndrome again?
That's a nuclear.
Nuclear meltdown.
Meltdown.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, nuclear meltdown.
Okay.
I gotta go syndrome
So
on
China Syndrome
that.
advances to the.
Is important, but if it's blown up by a nuclear war,
Right.
it kind of doesn't matter.
Soylent
So-
Green versus The Day After Tomorrow. Let's start with Aaron.
Soylent Green. I don't know how environmental it is, but
Lise?
I've seen it.
Silent Green is the after effects of environmental crimes and injustices from historical, and The Day After Tomorrow is kind of the same thing. I think I'll actually go Soylent Green, even though I have a major crush on two of the actors in The Day After Tomorrow.
All right, so
Mhm.
Soylent Green it is.
Father and son,
Yeah.
baby.
So now we have our championship.
Mhm.
China Syndrome versus Soylent Green. That's pretty solid. That's a good matchup, I think. Aaron, what do you think?
Going China syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah, nuclear war over nuclear accidents.
All right,
Over,
so China Syndrome it is.
And your vote would have been Rebecca?
I don't know. I mean, if we're talking movie quality, it would
Yeah.
be China syndrome. But the environmental problem at the core of Soylent Green, which is destruction of ecosystems and the loss of ability to produce food because of that destruction of ecosystems, is such a powerful
Yeah, like
environmental
we're facing
message.
that with the bees.
So if I were picking based on films, 100% China syndrome. If I'm picking based on environmental concerns that we might actually be able to do something about, I'm picking Soylent Green.
All
Yeah.
right. That's good.
And I mean, we're facing that with the bees right now.
That's good that you were conflicted. That meant it was a good matchup. So that was well done by all. Thank
It
you
was a
for
good assortment of films.
participating. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Now-
what was the one? Stillwaters? What was it? That we did not include that you thought we should have?
Dark water.
Dark
Dark
Water.
Waters.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also Color Out of Space. That was kind of freaky.
Yeah.
But remember we did that one, Aaron?
Yeah, I don't.
Oh yeah,
That's
that was
more
weird.
aliens.
That one I don't know.
affecting
That
our
one had
environment,
aliens
and-
landing, so it was kind of
Yeah, I don't know how much that was.
It was a Nicolas Cage
Yeah.
extravaganza. Well,
Uh-huh.
thank you for coming, Rebecca.
Let
At
me-
this, oh yeah,
may-
go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. I'd like to at least try to remember to ask, is there anything that you would like to highlight that we did not discuss during the main body of the podcast?
The only thing I would like to highlight is that there is an election coming up. And actually, I don't know when this is going to air, but if this is airing before the election, I would encourage everybody, please vote. The worst thing you can do is to not sort of exercise the franchise that people have fought for and died for. Regardless of whether you're voting for the candidate I want or not.
It'll be up
but
before the election. Sure.
Yeah, it'll be out before. And
Yeah.
that's an excellent message Rebecca. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. So where can, let's reiterate where people can find your work and, get your book. and things.
both this book that we're discussing and your environmental justice cartoons.
So
Or
the
comics.
easiest way to find information about me in general, including my scholarly work. I have other books that I'm sure your listeners would not sort of flock to.
You never know.
Not that many people are super interested in transboundary harm under international law, but if you are, I wrote a book about it. But exactly. It is, my website is RebeccaBratspies.com, which is just my first name, last name.com. And you can find links to the graphic novels there. You can find links to my scholarship, to past interviews with me, and where I've been quoted in the press as a scholar. And of course, naming Gotham, there are links to it there. There's also a bunch of information about it there, as well as links to the blog posts I mentioned, all of which are available for free. The book can be bought anywhere that one might buy a book. If you are inclined to buy it, I would encourage you to go to a local bookstore and ask them to get it for you. They can get it for you pretty quickly, and supporting local bookstores is a great thing. You also probably could get it from your library if you wanted to read it but didn't want to buy it. And I just, buy it, great. Don't buy it, read it. I would just love people to engage
what
with
we
the
tend
material.
to do is when we have a particularly interesting books, if at the beginning when I say listener, that's our little homage to Philip's sister, who is our one of our most devoted listeners and also
Awesome.
one of our first listeners. So if I say welcome listener, that's I'm like, that's a nod to Terry.
Oh,
A little
that's
wink to
awesome.
Terry.
I didn't know that.
But one of the things that we do is if we have a particularly interesting book, we might buy it to send to her.
Yeah.
Because, she's retired, so not a whole lot of income.
When I have to say
So her book, so she, she has trouble getting to a library because she lives in a very small town in Illinois.
the fun facts and the artwork and photos in it are really they're really nice. They lend almost an Art Deco feel to the whole presentation.
Yeah.
I usually ask people if it's okay if we go an hour. I've neglected to ask you that, but it's
I think we've done that though.
already gone.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
but
Sorry
No,
about
I've gone
that.
an hour and I was
That's
late.
right.
yeah, but we really appreciate it.
But it's
Thank
been
you.
a great conversation, and thank
You have
you.
an excellent
Sorry.
evening.
Oh, it's been
Yeah.
so much fun. Such a
Nice
pleasure
to meet
meeting
you.
you
Thanks
all.
for being on.
You too.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good to see you, Phil and Lisa.
You too,
Bye,
Aaron.
Thank
everybody.
you, Aaron.
All right. Have a good night.
We have social.
Twitter,
Yeah, pod.
Instagram,
Yeah, pod.
Facebook,
Yeah, pod.
website.
So let us know. Hit us back. Have a great week.